What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Pack a Day Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can follow the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. But you know my guest already, the one and only Aaron Nagler. You can follow him on Twitter at Aaron Nagler, of course. Aaron, it has been far too long. This is the antithesis of a slow news week. How the heck have you been?
I've been well, trying to keep up. There has been a lot. There's a lot going on. Obviously, this trade happening before the draft, I think you'd agree, best case scenario. The idea that we know what they have, we don't have to sit there and hem and haw. Are they going to trade him? Kind of dominating the conversation. Heading into this draft with somewhat of a clean slate is pretty phenomenal.
It really is. We were talking a little bit about that offline of just it's nice to kind of have it out of the way. We can focus on the draft now. I think the one downside is, as many people have told us throughout the years, now that Aaron Rodgers is no longer a Packer, we both have to retire at this point because there's nothing more to talk about from a Packer standpoint. It's all over.
Done.
So this is our co-retirement. This is why we got together to announce it at the same time. So good luck, everyone. No, I'm just
obviously. Have a great time.
This is going to be obviously a great time to talk to you. We had this plan for a while now. We're going to be going over draft in just a moment, but I want to, of course, start off with the Aaron Rodgers trade. So just giving the floor to you for a moment, 10,000 foot view, your overall takeaway from this trade as Aaron Rodgers heads to the Jets.
I mean, it's obviously a momentous change, right? The idea that I heard a lot about, a new chapter, turning the page, and all of that is true. But if you look through the 100+ year history of this franchise, it's hard. And I know Aaron kind of put it out there himself, right? The idea that he is at least in the conversation for one of, if not the greatest player in the history of the Green Bay Packers. Whether you believe that to be true or not, there's no doubt, like I said, he's in the conversation, and it's no small feat to make this move. I know there's been a lot of talk and chatter leading up to it, especially on Twitter, when it comes to what the Packers are going to get compensation-wise. But I think that's so secondary. Like, I'm very happy with the deal that Gutekunst put together. I think he did a really good job in that regard. But it is a organization that is clearly following their philosophy of having a plan at the position. That's where so much of this kind of misses me online, where people are arguing about, whatever they got comp-wise, or, other teams talking about what the Packers are going to do this year in 2023. It's so clearly not a move about 2023. The move to draft Jordan Love back in 2020 was a long-term focus. The idea that, okay, when we finally do get this kid on the field, yeah, it's going to take a bit. There's no doubt that they're not sitting there at 1265 Lombardi thinking we're going to go win a Super Bowl this year. That's the goal. It doesn't change. But, the idea is we have long-term plans in Green Bay in a way that most franchises, frankly, don't. So I think, to me, it's obviously a huge marker. It's very important. And the magnitude is probably somewhat lost in this kind of 24-hour news cycle, hell, hour-to-hour news cycle or minute-to-minute news cycle, given Twitter. But it is just this monster occasion that I don't think we can really fully appreciate or capture in the moment itself. But I clearly recognize that Aaron Rodgers, everything he did for the organization, it can't be overstated. Like, he was that good. He was that important. He's a monster. He's a titan, not just NFL-wise, but Green Bay Packers-wise. So it's hard to put into words, but that's the best I can probably do.
No, I'm really glad that you said that and went in that direction with it because, like you said, it's a 24/7 news cycle. We do this 24/7.
Pack a day?
Exactly.
Dealing with 24/7 news cycles?
I know, right? Who would have thought? But there is this lost in the moment. Heck, like even yesterday, I was like ready to be like, all right, let's talk about the guys the Packers are going to draft, because you immediately have to get to that already. But There is this reverence that I think you and I both have, and that obviously a lot of people have for this moment. It is a franchise-altering moment, and it's going to be tough to sort of put it all into words right now. It's going to take everyone stepping back, and it's going to take some time for, I think, everyone to sort of really recognize and understand, like you said, the magnitude of this situation. And let me ask you this. Did you feel like this was the right move at this time to trade Aaron Rodgers?
Yes, I did. And I know we've talked about this a couple of different in a couple of different venues, right? I think obviously most fans, right, were ready okay, I'm not going to say most, but there are a lot of fans who thought last year was the perfect time to do it.
Right.
I think stepping back and looking at it, I understand why they didn't. I understand why fans wanted them to, but it all comes down to Jordan Love and whether he's ready or not. He wasn't ready last year. He's ready now. That to me is the component. And I understand people look at the contract and they get frustrated about whatever that might entail. But if you're the Packers and you have a back-to-back MVP and you have this guy who you did draft and you do want to get on the field eventually, but you know he's just not ready yet, that's, again, talk about a component that doesn't really get talked about a whole lot. I think the Jordan Love piece is the most important, yet it gets the least amount of kind of airtime or what have you. It's hard because we don't have a ton to go on, right? We don't have a ton of film. He hasn't played a whole lot. But clearly the biggest difference between last offseason and this offseason is Jordan Love. So, yeah, I think I'm 100% on board with handing the keys to Jordan. And I echo Brian. It's something we've talked about at Cheesehead TV quite a bit this whole kind of year. He's just got to play.
Right.
He's ready to play. If you look at last summer to this summer, the Kansas City game to the Philly game, it's so clear he has progressed. He is at the point he's got to play, and that's what he's going to do.
Yeah, you just have to at some point get eyes on him, because I've said all along one of the worst things you could do is jettison Jordan to go in a different direction, and then Jordan ends up being a top 15 starter somewhere else in the league. Like, that's one of the worst.
After you invested all this time,
yes, effort, and energy, right. And we're the ones that put the first round pick plus to get him, and then spend the time developing him, and then he goes and tears it up for another team. That would be the worst case scenario. I also made mention too, and I was somebody last year who, even before the Broncos trade took place, put my stamp on it. I said I probably would have traded him a season ago. I also said it's a lot easier here in, my basement to make that decision, and there's real people involved.
Right.
And I also think too that the back-to-back MVPs is important. I also mentioned the other day, like, if you would have told me then that, like, yes, there's no question about it, the potential Broncos haul was better than what they just got from the Jets. But if you would have said, hey, you either can take this Broncos haul now, or this Jets haul is waiting for you a year from now, and you can have one more year with Aaron to see if you can run this back one more time with your back-to-back MVP and your 3 straight 13-win seasons. I don't hate, like, again, that's obviously benefit of hindsight, but, like, I wouldn't even hate of, like, knowing that, okay, let's take one more shot at it, and if not, we can still get this Jets haul like a year from now. Like, I don't think that that's worst case scenario either.
I don't either. I think I understand how people, again, talking about the contract, right? The contract is where most people kind of push back on Goody or the Packers, and they talk about, why did you do this, or why did you do it in this manner, right? I mean, Rodgers had some leverage there. Yes, I'm going to help you with your cap. I'm going to, like, take what I think they lost like $18 million on the cap last year because of this contract. And that's the part that everyone forgets. Like, he did them a solid in that regard. But yeah, I want to be paid. I'm Aaron Rodgers. I just won back-to-back MVPs. You got to pay me. So the idea, as you're saying, like sitting in our basement saying, well, just trade him. Well, not only is he a back-to-back MVP, but Jordan wasn't ready.
Yeah.
And you put all of that together, I understand it. And the contract, as it happens, doesn't turn out to be this real kind of, it's been made out to be this albatross around their neck, which, of course, there is definitely a component where they're going to be maneuvering cap-wise, especially this year. But, man, it's not like it's going to completely sink the franchise, which is kind of how it's been made out to be. And I never really took it like that. Like, yes, they've pushed a lot of stuff money-wise. They're dealing with a lot, having tried to go all in, which I loved Brian referencing in his presser. Was it yesterday? All these days blend together. Where he literally said, we tried to get something. He didn't really say, like, we went all in, but that was what he was referencing. And so now they've got to unwind some of that. There's no doubt. But I think, with Russ Ball and everything they've done as far as the way they've kind of maneuvered and put guys in certain positions, whether it's Aaron Jones taking a pay cut or getting one more year from Bakhtiari and restructuring his deal, like, they're in a healthy spot. Like, it's not like this Rodgers trade is going to sink them because of the cap. So, it's weird to me that people get so fixated on the contract. I understand it's a component, but it's not the only thing.
No, it's not. And I think it's funny too. Like, if you take a look at the 25 and under players on the Packers, compare with the Vikings, the Bears, the Lions, like, It's not too bad. You're not sitting in this awful, terrible situation. You've got a lot of talent on this team still. And obviously a lot of that's going to be dependent upon Jordan Love as well. One of the reasons I wanted to ask you that, if you thought it was the right time, I know you and I have both kind of talked in the past about, all right, it's time to move on for Aaron. You and I are both in a unique space, although it's not super unique anymore, where we're both Packer fans. We don't hide it.
Right.
We don't shy away from it, but we both have our analyst hat on at almost all times. And I know for me personally, it's a situation where I'm like, I believed in my heart of hearts and still believe that to this day, that was the right move for Green Bay to make. There's a lot of ways that this could ultimately go wrong, but I still believe it was the right move in the moment. But there was also that moment for me where, like, as soon as this sort of news hit, especially when Aaron went on Pat and said, I'm going to be a New York Jet, where like for a moment that analyst hat comes off and you're just like, you take a step back and you go, oh, Aaron Rodgers isn't going to be a member of the Green Bay Packers anymore. And I think that's where you opened up with the reverence and the respect for everything that he has done for this organization, for the city of Green Bay, et cetera, et cetera. But was there that moment for you? And maybe you just, sort of understood the stakes. It's not like it's our first rodeo. We've been there with Brett before, but was there that moment for you where it sort of hit you of like, wow, Aaron's just not going to be a Packer anymore?
I think it's been coming for so long at this point that there really hasn't been, it's funny because I completely agree. The idea that, 18 years, the amount of just the joy, if nothing else, in regards to winning so many games, seeing so many incredible plays, so many Sundays, Monday nights, Thursday nights, what have you, that are just like incomprehensible as far as the amount of investment emotionally as a fan, right, that I've put into this guy, and everything he did reciprocal to kind of give back as far as playing at such an insanely high level for so long, helping win so many games. But in a weird way, it's like, because of the fact that we've been here every offseason for the past 3 years or so, talking about what's going to happen, what does he want, the draft day bombshell, hell, going back a year before that, the drafting of Jordan Love, which really set all this in motion.
True.
I don't know if it's because of all that I've kind of maybe not steeled myself, but I haven't had a moment where I'm like, oh my God, this is so weird. It's just, I think a big part of it is because of everything we went through the last time around with Brett.
Right.
It's so less acrimonious this time. Like, even though you do feel the tension between Gutekunst and Rodgers, it's nowhere near what everything was going on that summer when Brett came back and they were booing Aaron at family night, and Ted was getting yelled at wherever you went in town, and there's just none of that this time. Everybody has kind of understood that this was coming. And I think there's also the component of I was a much younger man, fan, whatever, when the whole Brett thing happened, and Brett was very much the guy who shepherded us out of the darkness, so to speak, on the playing field, right? And Rodgers maintained and basically elevated that play and that level, but there wasn't that emotional attachment for me.
Yeah, that's well
said. There is for a lot of other people, maybe a lot of younger fans as well, but like for myself, my emotional connection was with Brett. With Aaron, I had a ton of fun, but for whatever reason, that emotional connection hasn't been there.
I'm the same way with you from the Favre standpoint. And I think, again, going through that had a lot to do with this as well. And again, for anyone who grew up and like Aaron was their quarterback, like it's, I'm sure, going to be totally different.
That's hard. It's hard, man.
Totally different. Yeah. We've both been there with Brett. I think the other thing, and as you mentioned, I mentioned this the other day as well, is like, it didn't ever feel like there was this one rip the Band-Aid moment. It seemed like as soon as the season was over, fans and a lot of us felt like, okay, this could easily be the case that, whatever happens, whether he retires, trade, et cetera, that he could ultimately be gone. And then you had sort of the fatigue from like all of a sudden the darkness retreat is happening. It's going into March and this is playing out for the third consecutive season. And there's some fatigue there. And then all of a sudden Aaron says, I intend to be a New York Jet. And then finally, weeks after that, you actually get the announcement from Schefter of the trade terms. And I just feel like there was never just this one, like, oh, you woke up one morning and you saw the tweet of like, oh my God, he's gone. Like there was a lot of breadcrumbs along the way.
Yeah, it's definitely been a slow burn in that regard. There's no doubt.
So we just heard what we saw. I don't know if you had a chance to saw, but Aaron's Instagram post that he posted.
I did see it. Yeah,
it was awesome, really professional. I thought really well done. We also heard that he's going to have his introductory press conference on Wednesday, 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern. What are you sort of expecting from that press conference? I'm assuming it's probably going to be, especially after the the very amicable Instagram post where I think everyone was looking like, all right, is he going to mention Matt? Is he going to mention?
Is he going to mention Gutekunst? That was all I really wanted to see, and
exactly.
he did. So I think, the knives will not be out. I think we'll get a fresh new start. Aaron's very excited, very appreciative of his time in Green Bay. I don't expect him, because I did wonder if like that introductory press conference would happen and he would take the opportunity to take one last passive aggressive swipe at Goody or something like that. But judging from that Instagram post, I would guess probably not. I think this will be, it's a new chapter. It's a new time. He's going to be really excited to get going with his new team. He'll undoubtedly say some nice stuff about Green Bay. I fully expect that.
Yeah.
But it sure feels like he wants to make a clean new start, which I understand. I totally get that. But that was, I did wonder if Goody was going to be mentioned in that post, and thankfully he was.
The one thing I'm interested in is, I'm sure he's going to be asked, because Goody's gone on the record multiple times of that, Rodgers never reached out to him. I'm sure he's going to be asked about that.
Returning the call. Yes.
That's the one thing that I'm going to be
I think he'll punt. I think he'll say, well, there was miscommunication on both sides or something along those lines, and then he'll move on. That's my guess.
I think you're probably right. I think it's going to be very clean and just, very respectful, and then moving on to the Jets and going from that. I think there might be a time.
We say all this, and he'll jump right from that presser to McAfee and just totally carpet bomb him. We'll
exactly.
We'll see.
Never know. I do want to ask you, and we'll move to the sort of the draft and the offseason after this, but how do you feel like Brian Gutekunst has managed this entire process? It's never easy. I remember one of the things I respected so much about Ted, and I do think it's a little bit different this time around, but like you mentioned, everyone was going to hate the guy. He knew he was going to be immediately the villain when he traded Brett, but he stuck by his convictions. He felt very convicted that it was the right move to make. And even though it was going to make him public enemy #1 in Green Bay, he stuck with it, did it anyway. And I had just so much respect in the moment that he did it. And it obviously paid off. He and Aaron and Mike won a Super Bowl together. But how do you feel like Goody has managed this process?
I think about as well as he could, given the circumstances. And I think what's really important to remember here, because those comparisons get made a lot for good reason. I made them myself. I think it's kind of eerie at points where you look at the two situations and it's like, what are we doing? This time really is a flat circle. But the thing to remember that I think it's lost sometimes is that Brian does not have the same job that Ted did. The idea that Brian has total control over the roster, which is true, but he also has equal footing with Matt and Russ answering to Mark. And the idea that he could just do whatever he wanted with Aaron Rodgers is probably fiction, right? There's zero doubt in my mind that if you put him on truth serum and asked last year, would you have traded him? Coming off those two MVPs, even given all the blowback you would have gotten, I think he probably would have.
I think
so. But he has to work with Matt and Russ and answer to Mark. And I think those voices had a hand in maybe keeping Aaron around for another year, signing that contract, etc. I'm not saying I don't know anything. I haven't talked to Brian about this, but that is my guesswork here. And I do think he's handled it extremely well, considering he does live in Green Bay, Wisconsin. He lives in a fishbowl, and he can't go anywhere without everybody knowing who he is. And I always remember when I was at the Press Gazette, he came on one of my podcasts, and I made a joke about Twitter, and he instantly picked up on it. It was a joke. It was right when the 76ers GM was kind of exposed for having burner accounts.
Yep.
And I made a joke at the top of this podcast about you probably have these burners out there. And he said, you'd have to ask my wife, which was a direct, reference to the story because the GM's wife was the one handling the accounts. So I was like, all right, so it's not like you're totally devoid of the internet kind of goings on. You clearly have your finger on the pulse here. But, given all that's been burning down around us on Twitter for the last 3 years when it comes to this kind of subject of Rodgers and what's going to happen and when are they going to make the move to Jordan Love? Are they going to make that move, etc.? I mean, you're on Twitter every day. You know how contentious it can get. And you got to think some of that gets filtered to him.
Oh, for sure.
By PR, especially with the bigger names checking in, whether it's Mike Florio, whether it's any of the national people talking whatever they're talking about, that he's at least some of that's getting through to him. and it never seemed to bother him, never seemed to faze him. I mean, he's a better man than me, because I would have been on Twitter like clapping back at everybody. But I thought for the most part he's done a pretty damn impressive job shepherding this entire thing to this point where now it is time for his guy to take the field.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the interesting part, right? Because I agree with you. I think he's done a good job, sort of managing this process, especially from like the contentiousness from a couple of years ago, where there's the rumors out there that Rodgers wants Gutekunst gone if he's going to come back, to them kind of like, goofing around on the field not too long after that and joking around, to making things as amicable as possible. Like, man, if I'm GM of the team,
right,
and the guy is asking for my job, and then he comes back, man, that is a tough ask. And, I thought he swallowed a lot of pride. I think he made mistakes leading up to that. He owned those mistakes after that. And then, kind of got through that, got another MVP season out of Aaron, got another, a couple seasons out of him, and then, decided ultimately to move on based on the current circumstances. But that is a tough gig. And I don't know how much better he possibly could have handled it.
Totally agree. The one thing to remember too is, I'm glad you brought up the idea, and the report, I think it was from Charles Robinson, that Aaron flat out wanted Goody fired.
Yeah.
I've never been able to confirm that in any way, shape, or form, but I have seen the texts where he belittles and makes fun of Gutekunst and calls him Jerry Krause. The idea that he is the Bulls GM who broke up that famous Bulls team. I've seen those, and I know that's real. And to your point, to be Gutekunst and know that that's out there and still be able to basically go to work and be a professional and not get emotional about it and not kind of retaliate or through the press or leaks or what have you. I mean, it's pretty impressive. The whole kind of summer of Rodgers' discontent, the Packers so clearly were of one single mind, like, we've got to get him back. We've got to get him back. And man, Goody's a better guy than I am, because like I said, I'd have been clapping back on everybody. No way I would have been holding my water the way he did.
You and I both. So let's transition this. We'll go from the trade. This is just a beautiful segue. How do you feel like this? How do you feel like this trade in specific affects this draft weekend? Obviously, moving up to 13, getting an extra second round pick, it's going to give Good a little bit more maneuverability. But do you see it affecting this draft weekend in any major way?
Yeah, it's nice that it gives him currency, right? Especially in those kind of first 50 picks. I do wonder how much we'll see them move around, though. I know Brian's obviously not afraid to do so. He's done it again and again and again. But I got to think that, swap from 15 to 13, I know Joe Douglas talked about it earlier today, how that was the last component of this trade that kind of got put in at the end, I guess. But that was the thing that got it over the hump. I've seen a lot of conjecture about, they're targeting a player. I don't think it's one guy. I think it's the ability to have, a couple of different prospects at different positions probably fall to you, and you get your choice of whichever one you want, rather than having to wait behind the Jets and the Patriots. The Patriots in particular, who have pretty similar needs to the Packers, you get up above them and get whoever it is you think might fall. I think that's much more about what that swap is about, rather than, like, I know everyone's like, oh, it's about JSN. And maybe it is. I mean, I think that's probably one of the guys in question, but I don't think it's foregone. Like, that's the dude that they're zeroed in on. As usual, Gutekunst is trying to keep as many options open as possible. That's what I think. And I think, again, getting the second round pick helps, maneuverability. I think most likely they'll probably stand pat and make those picks, but you never know.
Yeah, you never do know, especially with Goody. He likes to wheel and deal on draft day for sure.
He does.
I agree the same thing. Like, how many times have we heard already that teams have like 15, 16, maybe 17 first round draft grades in this draft? Well, if you're at 15, maybe you've got your choice of one or two of those guys.
Picking at the bottom, right?
Exactly. You just kind of have to take like whatever guy is left on our board. And you're still in a decent spot that at least you're getting one of those guys. But now at 13, all right, now we've got maybe 4 or 5 guys that you could potentially choose from. Just gives you options. And even if one of the guys that you were really hoping for is not there, well, you know what? If you're trading back from 13, then instead of 15, you're still getting more draft capital in that way. So in return. So I agree with you. I think it gives Green Bay a lot more options at that point. How do you mentioned very rightly so that there's a better GM in office than either of us, but let's put our GM hats on at the moment. Like, how do you want Green Bay to attack this draft?
Oh man, just get good football players. We do this every year, Andy. I'm
with you.
I understand. I get it. Like, we got to get help for Jordan, right? Or don't pick defense because they picked all this defense in the last few years. I understand all of that, but man, you know me. Like, just get somebody who can get on the field and help you. And it's funny because I remember talking to David Bakhtiari on one of our shows. I think it was a draft show actually 2 years ago, where we were kind of peppering with, what do you want? Like, who should they pick? And he's like, man, just help me win a Super Bowl. Like, right. That's where I'm at. Like, I understand that people will have their predilections and their preferences and what have you, but just as long as they can contribute. And I have faith that Brian and his staff is going to do what needs to get done to add to the rooms that need to be added to. And look, purely from a selfish standpoint, I want JSN because I wanted him to help me in Madden. Like, any skill position player who's going to be highly rated coming out, add him to my Madden team, help me whoop up on these kids online. That's what I need. All right. But like, GM hat, like, I want good football players. I want them to add to the mix. I understand, like I said, I understand all the different viewpoints and what people want, but man, just how many times have we sat there on draft day and gone, this guy's really going to help, or this is a terrible reach, and both of those things are untrue. Like, it's just, I can't with all that.
Nobody knows, right? I think that's the
nobody knows is the official Cheesehead TV slogan, post-draft grades every single year.
It's amazing. Can't wait for it. I'm with you 1,000,000%. Like, I know people are going to get all caught up in positions because safety and tight end and wide receiver have specific needs on them. Listen, if they don't draft a single tight end in this draft because they got really good players at other positions, I don't care. And I don't think that's going to happen. It would be probably,
I don't think so either.
Didn't. Right. But like, if you told me that they got an amazing edge rusher because they passed on Luke Schoonmaker in the 3rd round, like, I don't care. Like, go ahead and get good football players. Like that.
I like him though. I like that kid, the Michigan tight end, right? Yes, I really like him. And I hope they end up with him actually. Like, but this is my point. Like, here's the thing. Here's what drives me nuts, right? I'm just going to vent here a little bit. What drives me nuts is, like, you get out of round 1 and everyone, like, there's a terrible pick. And it's like, it's one pick. Yeah. Can we let the rest of the draft play out? Like, the amount of times that we've had kind of, just blowback after the first day. And I know the NFL loves this because this is why they've cut up the draft, right? Because we have all this kind of chatter for 3 straight days. And then everyone had taken apart round 1 and who won and who lost. Like, it just drives me nuts. Like, if they don't get a wide receiver in round 1, guess what? There are 6 more rounds. And the Packers have proven you can find some pretty darn good wide receivers on day 2 or 3. So it's just, that's where the wheels fall off for me.
No, I agree with you. And I think the other thing is that, like, we, as you kind of mentioned, we do this every year of, like, they got to get X and then they go Y in the first round.
And everyone freaks out.
And everyone freaks out. And it's like, we should probably know by now, Goot takes home run swings in the first round. He wants massive, like, Jair Alexander, home run swing, a little bit undersized, but home run swing, corner, potential shutdown guy, Rashawn Gary, Jordan Love,
big time.
Eric Stokes as a corner, super speed, Georgia, like, even Quay Walker and Devontae Wyatt. And I know they were a little bit more off brand for an older defensive tackle and an off-ball linebacker, but those are extremely athletic freaks from Georgia's defense. He is going home run swinging in the first round. And then, you know what? 2nd through 7th round, he's going for some singles and some doubles and some guys that can help the team. But he's trying to get that huge player in round 1. And I'm totally for that philosophy. And
what's interesting about what you just said too, it's like the off-ball linebacker and the older defensive lineman both came at the end of the first round, like 22 and 24. You know what I mean? Like, you can take some really big swings when you're up at 12 or 15, or you're dropping down and getting more capital and dropping back up to get Jair or whatever. That allows you to probably hit a better home run, But yeah, it's fascinating to me to watch Goody at work because we've had all these tried and true, what we knew was going to happen with the Packers draft throughout Ted's entire tenure, because he was so rigid as far as what he would and wouldn't do. Brian has shown that he's got some of the same tendencies, but man, the off-ball linebacker being a perfect example, you could knock me over with a feather when that happened, because that was just a position that I never thought in a million years that they would select in the first round, and then they did. So Yeah, but for me, Brian's a little more unpredictable in that regard.
Totally agreed. So that brings us to the main question that I don't even want to ask you, but what guys can we officially take off of our board because they are your guys in this draft, and they will never draft your guys in this draft? So be gentle, be kind, because we want some of these players, I'm sure, but who are your guys in this draft?
Unfortunately, Darnell Wright, the tackle from Tennessee, I absolutely adore him, really love him, need him in a Packers uniform, take him off your board because the Packers will never draft him. The other one is Matt Landers, the Arkansas wide receiver. That's a day 3 guy. I think he really intrigues me, and I think he would be a perfect fit in Matt LaFleur's offense. Just never going to happen because I love him. So those are my two true loves. Like, and I love Washington out of Georgia. I think everybody loves him. Like,
right.
But he's not really my guy. Like, I would love that pick, but like Darnell Wright, Matt Landers. Those are my two loves that I know will never happen.
Right,
because
so
I love
Packer fans, you heard it here first. Matt Landers, Darnell Wright will not be members of the Green Bay Packer draft class. So if you are betting on this, if you are, if you're in a draft pool somewhere,
we're here to serve.
Use this information as you will. Speaking of which, I'm going to put you on the spot. Who ultimately, if let's just say Green Bay ultimately does select at pick 13, they don't trade up, they don't trade down. Who do you believe will ultimately be the pick at pick 13?
Lucas Van Ness. I think edge is just a glaring need. It's a premium position. I think they're going to absolutely adore this kid, and I think he's a really good player. I do think Paris Johnson is a possibility if he falls.
Yeah.
I think, tackle or edge makes a world of sense. I know everyone's screaming for JSN. I don't see it at 13. I think it's Van Ness.
They may not get JSN. They may get LVN, Lucas Van Ness. I did a whole episode yesterday, top 25 players that just scream off the page as Packer people. And I started number 1 on my list with Lucas Van Ness. Like,
did you realize he number 1? Really?
Of my list of like people that just jump off the page as Packer
100%. People. Right. You watch him, the way he tests, his play, like everything. He
never started a game in college. How Green Bay Packers?
Green Bay? First round Green Bay. Perfect pick. Perfect Packers pick.
You get a top 13 pick in the draft, and he's never started.
Totally.
It's silly because
it's Clay Matthews-esque, isn't it? Remember, Clay hadn't had a ton of playing time in college either. So I'm not saying he's Clay. I'm just saying.
An absolute stud. I would love the pick, and he has got a ton of upside. Former hockey player. Like, again, he obviously played in the Big Ten in the Midwest.
Right. And it's not to dismiss the other edges that might be available. Yep. I think there is plenty of talent on offer, but I think they'll love him.
I agree with you 1,000,000%. All right. Last but not least, a couple final questions. What are you most looking forward to this season as we now transition into the Jordan Love era? And I know we're pre-draft. We don't know what the 53 is going to really look like, but as of right now, what are you most looking forward to?
Well, it's interesting because I chat about this a lot, and anybody who watches Packers Daily knows what I'm going to say, because this time of year we get so wrapped up, right? And it's a little bit different this offseason because of the whole Rodgers scenario, whatever but we get so wrapped up in the draft and the rookies and who are we going to add to the squad. And everything about this year for me is about the year 2 guys who were drafted last year and how they progress. I mean, how much do you go back and look at Eric Stokes, his rookie year, and then look at him prior to the injury in Detroit and think, ooh, not a great jump, right?
Josh Myers.
We need Josh Myers, another guy, like, not a great jump. The Packers need those guys from last year who pretty much to a guy looked pretty darn promising. Yep. Really good draft class for their rookie season. But that doesn't guarantee you anything. It doesn't promise you a thing. So for me, it's much more this season, and then we'll get excited about the rookies. We get to play with our new toys. I love it. I'm all in. But it's so much more about what Quay Walker does, what Devontae Wyatt does, Enigbare does, all these guys, and what they do on the field to develop Christian Watson, the whole receiving crew. That's where I'm excited, because now they've had their rookie year. They've learned how you're supposed to be a pro, right? Now let's get down to business. And I can't, like I said, that was a really promising rookie class. I'm so excited to watch them in 2020.
You didn't even bring up Zach Tom Bombadil. I can't believe you left your.
He's part of the gig. He's part of the gig. Look. Zach Tom, he's going to be hopefully competing for center and winning that job. So I'm very much looking forward to it.
No, I think so too. It is a really fun class that I think you want to talk about how good Green Bay can be this upcoming season. Obviously, Jordan's a huge part of that, but that second year potential jump from those players, those are going to be players that are playing a ton of snaps, regardless of whether they take a jump or not. The Devontae Watts, the Quay Walkers, the Inigbaris, the Christian Watsons, the Romeo Dobbs, the Zach Toms, like all of those guys. That's not even mentioning guys like Tariq Carpenter, who was already a special teams ace a season ago. We'll see if they actually get anything out of Sean Ryan in year 2. Like, that is a fun class to keep an eye on. And I'm right there with you. I think that's going to be a really fun thing to watch this upcoming season. And then last but not least, again, I know we don't have a 53-man roster. I know we don't have a draft yet. There's going to be free agents probably signed after the draft. But what are your early 2023 expectations for this Green Bay Packers team and Jordan Love?
Yeah, I think I expect to see a pretty darn competitive team. I do not doubt for a moment that there will be struggles along the way. I think Jordan is going to have a really good supporting cast. He's in a really excellent offense with a good offensively minded coach. I do hope people understand, as a first-year starter, there are going to be times where Jordan struggles, and I completely expect that to happen. You know, it's a big jump when you come in for, you know, a little bit of duty here, or you get your first start in Kansas City because of COVID. And, you know, basically the defensive coordinator does engage 8 through the entirety of the game. Like, now that you're going to be seeing teams week to week with film on Jordan, preparing for him every week and showing him stuff that he's never seen before. There's going to be bumps in the road. I'm fascinated to watch how he develops, how he learns from his mistakes. And I think while he does that, the Packers should be able to win, you know, enough games to be in contention for the playoffs. And I think if they get to the end of the season, and some of this is dependent on injuries and all the regular caveats, but, you know, if they get to late November, early December, and they're at least in the mix for a wild card, if not even the division, I think that's a pretty good step in the right direction when it comes to the first year with Jordan Love under center.
I think that's what makes this potential season so exciting, is just the complete, like, NFC is a crapshoot already. Like, it's a really interesting conference. The NFC North, extremely interesting. You've got Lions players being suspended already and released because of gambling issues. You've got the Vikings, who I think are going to regress. Who knows what the Bears will become? Like, if you told me that the Packers finished first, second, third, or fourth in the division, I'd be like, yeah, you could make that argument, and I would 100.
And yeah, you could make a case for any one of those. But what's fun is that legit across Vegas, the Packers are being picked to finish last. I welcome that. I love the idea that everyone thinks we're going to suck. So bring it on, man. It's great. Let's shock the world. I'm all in on that.
Aaron, any final thoughts before we get out of here? And of course, tell us about the Cheesehead TV draft extravaganza you have going on.
Extravaganza, as well. Yeah. Well, every year for, I guess, basically since the lockdown, and we just had to do it because we were all just kind of hanging out. We've got a live stream, all 7 rounds, just basically everyone hanging out online, watching the draft together. We do it each and every year. Thursday night, no different. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hope you could stop by, Andy. We'll have David Bakhtiari, Kenny Clark, Jamal Williams, John Kuhn, and Packers fans worldwide, along with a bunch of media members stopping by. It's always a lot of fun. Yeah, and get the Cheesehead TV draft guide if you haven't got it yet. There's tons of great work by people way more knowledgeable than myself when it comes to the draft. I always say it's our greatest piece of content every year because I am minimally involved. It's really good stuff by a lot of people that work their butts off and do great stuff each and every year.
Paul Noonian has a phenomenal piece on tight ends in that draft guide too.
It's so good. It's so good. I'm jealous. It's so good. Yes,
I know.
That's an excellent.
I take it back. Piece. I'm not going to compliment him. It's so good. Aaron, thanks so much for doing this. I hope you have a phenomenal week with the draft and everything that's going on with Green Bay. I know the draft extravaganza is going to be beyond amazing. So where can we follow you and plug anything on your way out?
Yeah, it's just at Aaron Nagler on Twitter, and visit cheeseheadtv.com early and often, people. All we do is eat, sleep, and breathe Green Bay Packers.
Appreciate you a ton. Thanks for doing this. Of course, you can follow the podcast at Pack-A-Day Podcast. You can follow me at Andy Herman NFL. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. That does it for us. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.